Chapter 9. Jack woke up from nightmares of a man in green to find that the forest he'd fallen asleep in was gone. Instead of leaves above him, now there were pink and white tiles. And whatever he was lying on was smooth, unlike the rough forest floor. He started to sit up, but something held him firmly in place. Hard ropes of some kind covered his chest and legs. Well, that probably wasn't good news. "Hello?" Jack said, looking around as much as he could while being held in place. A massive headache pounded the sides of his skull, and for some reason, his feet were really warm. "Huntsman?" he asked more quietly, a little afraid of the answer. "You're awake, darling," said a woman in a raspy voice. The speaker leaned over his head so that Jack could see her face. Except there was no face to see. Instead, a black hooded robe covered what looked to be a smooth white orb, almost like an egg. And then the egg cracked across the center, splitting jaggedly in half in what seemed to be a horrifying mouth. "My children found you in the forest and were growing ever so hungry," the faceless woman said. "I almost let them eat you whole. There on the ground I did. But that wouldn't do, darling, no. My children deserve a home-cooked meal. They do indeed." And just like that, the situation plummeted past bad and headed for can't get much worse. Despite his pounding heart and the sudden sweat all over his body, Jack took a deep breath, knowing nothing would be helped by panic. At least not until you could run screaming. "Who are you?" he asked, slowly flexing every part of his body to see how strong his bindings were. He felt a little give in the ropes around his legs, but not much. "I'm no one in particular," the woman said with a small giggle, a crack in the eggshell giving the impression of sharp teeth. "You're a witch," Jack said, recognizing her non-answer. "So you're not going to tell me your real name?" "Names have power, darling," the witch said, stepping out of Jack's vision. For a second, he wasn't sure where she was, but then he heard her down near his feet. "Yes, they do. Don't they, Jack?" "Uh-oh." "My name's not Jack," he said. "Who told you that?" The witch cackled, still out of sight. "The girl, of course, darling. The one who said your name while she slumbered. Quite the tasty treat there, darling." At that, Jack abruptly stopped sweating as his insides froze up. "What did you do to her?" he said quietly, barely able to hear his own voice over his heartbeat. The witch put a hand on his leg, and where she touched him, his skin went numb. "Don't you worry about her, darling. Yes, she's quite safe, she is. Recognized her necklace, I did. And that one's worth more alive than in my stomach. Yes. But you, darling, you're another tale altogether. Yes. You're to go in the oven for dinner." Then we'll see if we can't trade your friend to the Wicked Queen for some dessert. And then something sharp pressed into his skin next to the witch's hand. Jack bit his lip to keep from yelling out in pain. Only there wasn't any. Whatever it was didn't seem to be cutting him. Only his pants. Don't fret, darling, the witch said. I'm just removing your clothing skin. Gives such a burnt flavor if you leave it on, darling. The witch brought the sharp object down again and sliced. The feeling of sharp metal on his skin sent Jack into a terrified frenzy, and he frantically kicked out with both legs. He missed at first, but a second kick managed to knock the witch's hand away slightly, sending the sharp metal in her hand right into the rope tying Jack down. Suddenly he was free, as cutting the rope on his legs had loosened the rest of his bindings. Jack quickly pushed himself up enough to see the witch, then launched his foot right at the witch's eggshell face. The kick connected, knocking the witch backward off her feet. Jack quickly pulled the rest of the strangely sticky ropes off himself, then threw his legs over the side of the table, noticing for the first time why his feet had been so warm. Only a few inches from his toes was the most enormous black metal oven he'd ever seen. And then a gnarled claw sunk into the table next to him. "Oh no, darling," said the witch, her white head rising up over the side of the table. His kick had knocked the witch's hood off because beneath it was nothing at all. The white orb that made up her head didn't go past the halfway point, like someone had broken the eggshell in two. The back was completely hollow, and not only was her head empty, she now had an indentation in the shell where he'd kicked her. As Jack watched with horror, the dent slowly pushed back out with a nauseating pop. "You mustn't struggle, darling," the witch said, shuddering to her feet as she pulled her hood back on. "That won't do at all. Not at all. You'll make your meat all tough." "Yes, you will," and Jack kicked her again, but this time her gnarled old hand came out of nowhere to catch his foot. She held it in place for a second, then cruelly twisted it, sending a lightning bolt of pain all the way up to his waist. "It's rude to interrupt, darling," the empty face said. The witch yanked upward on his leg, pulling Jack up and off the table, dangling him in midair. "I intend to crack these little bones," the witch said in a delighted tone. "Yes, I do. There are such tasty flavors in your little bones, darling. And they're just going to waste." Jack kicked out desperately, trying to free himself from her grip, but the witch just held on tighter, her claws cutting into his skin. Giving up on his legs, Jack groped around on the strangely sticky floor for something to hit her with, but there was nothing within reach. The witch yanked the oven door open, and the heat from inside exploded over both of them. The witch bent to look Jack right in the face as he swung helplessly over the floor. "Thank you, darling," she said, drool dripping out of the crack that was her mouth. "Thank you for letting me eat you." As Jack stared in horror, her mouth began to close in on his leg, as if she was going to take a bite out of him right then and there. He punched her with both hands, but his blows just sank into her robes as if there was no body to hit. As the witch's faceless head got closer, a flickering tongue pushed past the cracked mouth, licking the edges in anticipation as she closed in.